And welcome to the monthly Journal of Expressive Writing open mic. It is January 10th, 2024. It's our first meeting of the year. Happy New Year, everyone. It's great to be here with you tonight. It's especially wonderful to be here tonight to introduce our featured reader, Olga Livshin, which I will do in just a few moments. But I would love to start the evening by introducing you. I'm sure many of you know her already. The reason we are here, Jen Minotti, the founder and editor of the Journal of Expressive Writing. Jen, hello. Will you please say a quick hello to everybody tonight?
Hi, everybody. Happy New Year. And it's really, really, really great to see you. I know this is a busy time of year and there's lots of different events that you could be at. So I'm always just super grateful that you're here. And I'm really excited to hear Olga read her work and the people, the 15, 16 people on our list who are going to read their work tonight. So thank you so much, everybody, for being here.
Excellent. Thank you, Jen. Well, as many of you know, I also really like us to open our time together as a community and as a gathering and as writers and readers and listeners sharing this space. I like to open with a poem for our beginning and a poem for our gathering. And tonight I have chosen a poem by Jan Richardson, How the Light Comes. I cannot tell you how the light comes. What I know is that it is more ancient than imagining, that it travels across an astounding expanse to reach us, that it loves searching out what is hidden, what is lost, what is forgotten, or in peril, or in pain, that it has a fondness for the body, for finding its way toward flesh, for tracing the edges of form, for shining forth through the eye, the hand, the heart. I cannot tell you how the light comes, but that it does, that it will, that it works its way into the deepest dark that enfolds you, though it may seem long ages in coming or arrive in a shape you did not foresee. And so may we this day turn ourselves toward it. May we lift our faces to let it find us. May we bend our bodies to follow the arc it makes. How the Light Comes, Jan Richardson. Well, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Olga Livshin tonight before she reads from her two books, from her own poetry and from translations. A little bit about what a couple of other poets have said about Olga's book, A Life Replaced, including the poet Maggie Smith, who says this: Olga Livshin has braided her own poems with her superb translations of Akhmatova and Gandelsman, poets she describes as ecstatic voices. Livshin's voice, too, is ecstatic and unflinching and loving and full of earned wisdom. In poem after poem, Olga, who immigrated to the US from Russia as a child, acknowledges the two Americas she knows firsthand, the one that fears and demonizes and the one that welcomes. A Life Replaced is astonishingly beautiful, intelligent, and important. That is Maggie Smith speaking about Olga, and then Nomi Stone. In this sensuous, funny, dark, and tender collection, Livshin documents her life as a Russian-American, American-Russian, an immigrant, a Jew, grappling with memory, home, exile, and survival amidst violent times, braided with the worlds of the interlocutors she translates. In reply to Anna Akhmatova and to all of us, Livshin implores, this century is worse than those before it. Change something. from his foreword to A Life Replaced. Ilya Kaminsky writes, haunted by exile, longing for linkages between past and present, Olga Livshin's A Life Replaced is a collection of poetry that wants to spread a blanket of wild buckwheat over a meadow, and does just that. What is the meadow of this book? It is memory, both personal and collective, bringing voices of many poets spoken through the same mouth to us in English. It is summer everywhere except war. This is a book where childhood comes alive and we see Livshin's parents and various other citizens in a city known for its laughter. There is the legendary Odessa poet Yuri Mikhailuk wrestling with flocks in the Soviet Socialist Republic of tomato plants. And then the page of life is torn from a book. We see immigrants, refugees, pain. What salves this pain? What glues the pages back into the books? The love of poets is the connective tissue. Livshin is in conversation with two poetic masters, our contemporary Vladimir Gandelsman and a great 20th century poet, Anna Akhmatova. So I'll just say a few more things about Olga and her bio. Her poetry and translations appear in the New York Times, Plowshares, the Kenyon Review, and other journals.
It's a special show.
Everything okay? Sorry, I was hearing some whispering. She was raised in Odessa, Ukraine, then in Moscow, and then came to the US with her family. And the first poem she wrote in English was about seeing the moon at JFK. How could the same moon appear in the Russian Federation and the US? Her PhD is in Slavic languages and literature. She taught in the Slavic field at the university level between switching to teaching creative writing. Well, we welcome you. We're thrilled to have you. Thank you for coming. I give you Olga Livshin.
Thank you so much for this incredibly generous welcome, Kelly. Thank you for having me, Kelly and Jennifer, and the Journal of Expressive Writing. Thanks for everyone. Thanks to everyone for coming tonight. When you have many things to do, you have chosen poetry, and that warms my heart. Seeing new faces and some familiar, friendly ones. So I'm going to start with a poem by A Life Replaced, a book that was written during the Trump times, which of course are echoing us every day these days. The government that I refer to is, that government of the Trump administration. And this book was born of, discontent over the hatred that was unleashed in the wake of Trump's 2016 election, as well as the war in Ukraine. Many of us, including myself, on some days think about the war or talk about the war there as beginning in 2022, last year. But actually, of course, it began in 2014 with the illegal annexation of Crimea. And so it goes. And so this rise of authoritarianism in both of these countries was on my mind. Translating a Life. This is dedicated to dear friends and the people who spearheaded those first efforts in translating Ukrainian poetry in the wake of the war. And their names are Oksana Maximchuk and Max Orsochinsky. Their anthology is called Words for War, New Poetry from Ukraine. I really recommend it. It's a fantastic book. Just everything about it is beautiful. The poems, the translations, the publishing, just great stuff. So here it is for Oksana and Max, Translating a Life. Someone spread a blanket of wild buckwheat over a meadow. Someone tucked puffball pillows in each corner of the purple-green sheet. It is summer everywhere, except war. War where it used to be home, and now war by government here. And what does it matter that the meadow seduces the bees in pollen, or me in lines of a poem, or that I hear perfectly good Russian names for plants and translate them into you and me-ish. Take the tea mushroom, the little fox mushrooms and piggies, the early field dweller, the mysterious cheese eater. These words are undocumented here, and the country that sent them erases every syllable with its crimes. Take an under birch mushroom anyway. It's a choice edible. Birch bolete in your tongue, on the tongue, the language for falling in love with forests and stories and friends, does not care who's killing whom. Unfortunately, I care. And sitting here by a huge flowering bush, I see no refuge. What languaged fantasy could stop us from being murderous strangers? Would you take a Russian mushroom name, tuck it in your lapel for the brief banquet of life? Does that translate anything else for you? Is this how it works? Just a moment. I have to tell a family member to stop jingling with coins. 12-year-olds and money. It's important. Okay. And so, translating a life. The other poems I'll actually read tonight are all from my second poetry collection, which is in progress. And here's another poem about nature. It mentions certain names for plants that seem also absurd, but they are our American names. Thank you very much. And they're real. Most of them are native plants. Anybody here into gardening? Yeah, great. And anyone here into enjoys gardening with native plants, authentic native plants? Aha. Yes, me and you, Kelly. And Jen, this was just meant to be our date tonight. And here we are. So this one is called May apple. I just learned that word about 1.5 years ago. I'm very proud of myself. And it's a beautiful little plant with dappled kind of leaves. They're little, what looks like shadows on it. And it does indeed have a tiny little nobule that looks a little bit like an apple if you exercise your imagination or you're from Europe where apples grow. And the apple indeed emerges in May. May apple. Some words plant wildness in the mind. Beard tongue, lolls, huge jawed. But in my backyard, the flower, barely visible, grayish white. Who called it that? May apple, I am late to your naming party. In May, my great-greats planted beets. My roots in still frozen earth. In immigrant hands, all English wilts into ragwort. Donated syllables like the dark polyester sweater, my 14th spring, heavy with a stranger's perfume. I am in a relationship with somebody else's dead. Oh, to know Ladybird, beyond the nickname of President Johnson's wife. But my Colorado-raised husband does not know either. He plugs our care into the search engine. Together we glide after the words Scottish and Southern roots. It bobs glowing, a little toothpaste bob in our mouth. It lectures ladybugs protect crops by eating pests. Farmers pray to Virgin Mary, that lady in the sky, pray to defend them. And ladybirds arrive in the shared room of our minds. Weighty as any bird, they orbit my love, a retinue to his tall warmth. Oh, to love you, ladybird. To pet the live leaves, feathers, fur, with sounds bequeathed by curious strangers, blowing raspberries, mayapple from 300 years ago. Onwards to heavier topics. We translated this past year a book. This is a book of Ukrainian poems written in the original Russian. Some Ukrainians read in Russian, although that is quickly changing. Ludmila Hersonska is the poet. She is lovely. She's from Odessa, like myself originally. And I'd like to show you her picture. If you just give me a moment, please. yeah, she was born in 1965. And I just love the amazing range that she has in her poems. There's just a little bit of her, but it's part of the team of translators. This is Andy Janko, my husband. This is Ludmila, and this is her husband, another amazing poet from Odessa, Boris Khersonsky. Because Ludmila is important, here she is with some very Ukrainian colors of kind of a bluish purple and yellow. And this refers to another poem. So I will stop the share. Ludmila writes about spirituality, and she writes about war in very direct terms. She has an amazing command of imagery that really captures people's hearts in every language she's translated to. But she also writes about things that most poets kind of have an uncomfortable relationship with: housework, domesticity, the traditional female repertoire. I'm not a fan, but I find in my poetry as if, she gives me permission to write about some of these things. And so her poems are about day-to-day life in Ukraine. I'm actually going to read a poem that I wrote that is a collage poem created from Ludmila Khersonska's statements in her interview. I did an interview with her for the Rumpus, and many poets are here in the audience. You know we talk in poems, right? So poetic and lyrical statements were very easy to trailer into a little bit of a collage, but mostly it's just, my admiration for Luda. And so here goes. The title is Poets Have Tunnel Vision, Ludmila Khersonska says. It is important to talk to evil. Children talk. Hey, darkness, I'm not afraid. They get up at night, a dialogue with darkness. During an air raid, I would talk to my cats, my plants, or lay a spell on the enemy's bombs. In wartime, people want help with the names of things. A poem is a prayer. Women fight and heal, take the kids to safer places, write anger. Now I have to read about the difference between different missiles, to tell by ear what was flying, the Ukrainian term for, bombings, what was flying, where it might fly. Now I walk around the castle and think, such a beautiful building, such a smart building. The walls are thick, the windows small. We had an earthquake here. Everything is shaking, the building shaking, but you think it is the Russians firing at your home. I came out of the building smiling. Ludmila is currently in Italy at a residency called Civitella Ranieri, and she and her husband have been there since almost the start of the war, very generously, but they are in fact in a medieval castle. And she's, of course, taken notice to that, as any poet would. What does it mean to be in this medieval castle during a war? Here's another kind of collage poem, and this one is not about another poet I just love. Julia Musakovska, or Yulia Musakovska, is from Lviv. She is wonderful, and her poetry has this wonderful kind of sense of tenderness and wanting to protect a beloved. And with that, of course, the reader too, because she uses the you, and you could be anyone. Julia Musakovska toasts the new year. And this poem is actually, so it is a collage of her posts during this past New Year's Eve. So between December 31st and January 2nd of this year. This is a fresh poem. So it's a collage of those posts, as well as her poem called The Spartan Boy. And it was translated by Olena Jennings and published in the journal Apophenia. Julia Musakovska's poetry collection is forthcoming from a wonderful publisher, Aerosmith, the same folks who did this book. And so it goes. And the poem here is Olena Jennings' version in English. I'm going to speak these posts, I'm going to speak as myself, and then when I put my hand on my heart, that's the poem talking. So posts in dialogue with poem. Julia Musakovska toasts the new year. Some of my old poems fit these times. Are these times all that new? The war that you've been carrying in your shirt pocket gnawed a hole in you. A mom wounded by shattered glass. New Year's Eve, fireworks. Your heart keeps falling out. I sew the hole shut. Grateful to our air defense for guarding our slumber. The city sets its hills like horns. Grateful to pick up my son, wander the streets of Lviv, and watch blackbirds alight on their mistletoe nests. Your fierce hatred of fireworks. The birds take off again, an agate necklace breaking. You have chosen me because of my skillful, sensitive fingers. Next year will be, surely, just as straining as this one. I'm comfortable holding a needle. Happy New Year, dear ones. This is one of my poems, and it has a lot of dark gallows humor. It's a trigger warning, and also mentions of the Holocaust. So if there are any fellow Jews or other people sensitive to the topic, you might want to skip the next 2 minutes. But I'm drawn to kind of Jewish humor. My father was a humor writer in Odessa. And what I see now is that it wasn't just Odessa, the city known for its literary culture and really funny people of all kinds, but also Ukraine. We talk a lot about Ukrainian strength, Ukrainian resilience, right? Resilience is kind of the cliche opposite of, well, giving up, which is what we all want to do these days when reading the news. At least I do. But there are also other matters that I feel like it's important to talk about. This humor, it's how people seem to get to hope. And hope is something we can all use, right, in these times. So this poem is called Deadbeat Gods. A few Holocaust survivors die and go to heaven. So goes the joke. They sit together laughing and reminisce about Auschwitz. God is surprised. What could be so funny? The Jews. Oh, you wouldn't understand. You weren't there. Through the lens of this joke, I can look at Aleppo, Kharkiv, and Bucha. But this Kharkiv and Bucha never again swiftly becomes, no, just look. See our God, the Father, walking into our lives, then immediately walking out. He forgets his alimony and texts potty jokes to his ex-chosen people. See God the Son walk out of the Last Supper after the first act. Disgraceful. This play did not follow the Aristotelian graceful narrative curve. As for the Holy Spirit, look in the mirror. We are the deadbeat souls of the world. Only in despair do we stutter, brother, why have you forsaken me? But the heavenly Jews sit together, drinking their well-earned Manischewitz. Together, they transform hell into language. And from Lviv, my teacher sends me a meme. Ukrainians don't get depression. Fuzzy cat faces express anger, melancholy, grief. How do they do it? Did they inherit that legacy? Is humor the elixir they all drank? Did death teach them to love their neighbor? In Odessa, my friends marvel at a light show. Girls dance by the famed opera theater in tiny dresses. This is also not a figure of speech. Here are Odessa children dancing in little dresses as promised. Here's a boy eating ice cream. Little kids wearing traditional embroidered shirts and people creating culture at a time of war and laughter and hope. May this inspire us.
Olga, let me just interrupt you for one quick second. Kat is asking in the chat, what is the name of that poem that you just read, please?
Oh, that's called Deadbeat Gods. It's not published yet. Yeah, that's good. Okay, and I see a boy who wants to sit with me. Do you want to sit with me? This is my son, Nathan. You can get in the picture. Get in the picture if you say hello. Hello, there's Nathan. Okay. So it looks like we are at 16 minutes. So I'm just going to read a couple of poems by Ludmila because I love her work so very much. This is another angry sarcastic poem full of humor. The issue at hand is, well, the truth. You shall see. Where, she asks, are my irises? Where, she asks, are my irises? Yeah, the purple ones, but especially the yellow ones. Have you seen them? They were tall with their little tongues sticking out. Their leaves were sharp and strong. They were so tall, so peaceful. Maybe you've seen them? Oh, yes, we saw them. Of course, we saw them. We denazified your irises. They were preparing an attack, planning to join the EU and NATO. Stockpiling biological bees. That's not true. They never traveled outside the borders of the garden bed. They are flowers. Why the hell do you lie all the time? You trampled them. To you, nothing will ever be pretty. Why do you lie all the time? Why? So that's our sarcastic Ludmila. And here's a little bit of tender Ludmila. See, doing on time. Yeah.
Take your time. You take your time.
I think, yeah, we can get through the next 2 minutes so that we are up against 20. Well, let me read two short ones. So this book that I translated with Andy, Maya Chhabra, and Left Friedman is as much about the return of history as about anything else. And so these big topics, right? How do we tackle them as poets and as thinkers? Here she alludes to World War II and how we now again have a war in Europe, and how that war kind of, obliterated all of everyday life throughout what was the Soviet Union. And this is also part of her wartime diary. So this is War, Day 9. War, Day 9. Let's fortify our windows so that they don't explode into tiny parts and shards. The bottom of the sea is almost here, crawling up from below. Just like back when, a generation ago, the ground churned, decimating their happiness. Wouldn't it be silly to choke like that right now? Things still feel normal. It's spring out there, yet a cloud of sulfurous gas is rising, like someone shaking up a black sea, and a hazardous muck surges to the surface, just like a human's true nature seeping out. There are a lot of reflections on what are we? Are we fundamentally good or evil? How can we be capable of both? So I'm going to end on a note of good. One character who is always good in this book is the speaker's mom. This is called When I Am Just Like My Mom. When I am just like my mom, just as pretty and young, I'll be 90 years old. For my birthday, I'll want a bottle of French perfume called Salvador Dali and chili-colored lipstick. Chile is a color spelled with a lowercase letter, not Chile, the country by the sea. In the past, they wrote on postcards, I wish you a sea of happiness and oceans of love. Neither this nor that for any of us. My mom has a kind smile and a girl's soft skin. I'll have that too when I turn 90 years old. May we all turn 90 years old and continue living, and certainly all of our Ukrainian friends and loved ones. Thanks so much for having me. All right.
Okay. Okay, wow, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Olga. I uh, there's a lot to say. It's been a very, very moving meeting. And
No light topics for us. And Kelly is a wonderful, wonderful, kind volunteer who's done countless hours of her time. Well, you can tell people if you want to what you've done. I know it. I don't know how much you want to advertise, but she's been really helpful to a whole bunch of professionals in Ukraine and her other
well,
professions.
I have been very fortunate to make some Ukrainian friends that I never knew I would make. That's what I've been able to do. So I am very moved by your reading. First of all, I want to compliment you on your presentation. Your reading of your poems is very lively and very very dramatic and wonderful, engaging, I should say. So thank you for that. We do have a couple of questions, just a couple of questions in the chat room, which I invited because I want to include those. I think we might start by talking a little bit about, first of all, Olga's book link is in the chat room. You can buy her books directly from her. That's the best way to get them. Pay her via Venmo in that link, and she'll send you a signed copy. So you're going to get a personally signed copy from Olga if you buy them for $15 per book at the link in the chat room. Okay, so I want to have you make sure that you're going to do that. But we want to talk a little bit about, you've presented your own poems, you've presented poems in translation, you have presented poems in translation and collages today. And there was a question, we might just start with Casey's question. Can you talk about how you use and choose to write in different genres of poetry, translation, and nonfiction? What comes first, idea, intention, theme, or do you select the genre, then see where the writing takes you?
Thank you so much for the question. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to do more nonfiction. I go through phases where translation and or other activism, it's kind of how I see it, or community work, seems important and sometimes displaces my other plans because, otherwise things are intolerable and I would feel ashamed when Nathan, my son, someday asks me, Mother, what did you do in Trump times? And I can be like, here, look at this. I have proof. I was a good girl. No, but he's been dragged to a lot of protests. Yeah, so because I hang out with a lot of poets, as I'm sure many of you do as well, the themes are kind of always circulating in my head, and occasionally I want to highlight or amplify somebody. And the translation is a way of doing it, social media is a way of doing that, and just friendship. So and it's a lot easier to write from an interactive point of view, whether that's ekphrasis or collage or an erasure poem, even when you're angry at somebody. My friend Julia Kolchinsky-Dasbach did a Putin speech where he denies that Ukraine was ever a country. She had some things to say and she deleted most of that speech. I think it left him 5 lines. Anyway, all of that is much more interesting and a lot easier to do, I think, as a palimpsest than poems that dig into, the soul and the flesh of the author. And sometimes it's an incredibly uncomfortable position. I do a lot of that too. So to me, it's a lot more interesting to have that interactivity.
Interactivity. Well, one person had a question about, I think it was Mona, had a question about, she said, do you need permission to do a collage poem? Do you need to get permission to write a collage poem? And so maybe you could answer that.
Yeah.
How you approach it.
Yeah, I mean, this is all quite new. I actually wrote some of these poems in the last few weeks. And I initially approached them as erasure poems. My friend does a lot of those, Julia Kolchinsky-Dasbach. Because these are poets whose friendship I value, and because these are their words that either nearly border poetry or are poetry, I did feel the need to ask permission to ask, and I wasn't sure how they would react against that. but they saw they're very good people, and they saw my intention in them, and the intention was not to take over their words. It was very much to give them the microphone and to highlight the beauty of their voices. So they said some really fantastically hilarious things. So Ludmilla said, "Is this a quilt to cover us in our pain? Is this a quilt?" Yes. That now I know that's what I was doing. Indeed, it was. And with Julia too, she said, "Oh, this feels like you're culling flowers from the dirt of my Facebook posts." It was so charming and so true. You know, think about the yin and yang, the dirt and the flowers, and you know, all of our flowers grow from dirt. So yeah, I would anyway, but you know, not in the case of Putin, maybe. Yeah, I don't think you give permission, or nor do we need to seek it. I think erasure poems kind of have that kind of dominant kind of thing about them, that we are purposely really engaging and breaking through the solid facade of buildings. And I just realized that the first time I encountered this concept is you, Kelly. You taught us all about Mary Ruffle in your workshop that I was fortunate to take years back. And I remember looking at this and saying, "Oh, this is not nice." And then thinking, "Oh, this is really cool. This is really empowering." So I do think that's a slightly different experiment, but also worthwhile. So just different energies.
Well, somebody is asking if you're related to the upstate New York poet Lynn Livshin, and I doubt you are because you're Livshin, not Livshin, but somebody wanted you to answer that one. Are you
Yeah,
related to Lynn Livshin?
I'm not.
No.
Thank you for asking. I appreciate the association. Yeah, it's funny looking at kind of groping for essences, right? When we look at our ancestry, I kept pondering where do my people come from? And I, you know, looked it up as we do, and it led me to Moravia and to what is it? The town of Lipschutz, now in Germany. I guess that's where the German census found my people, who happened to be there and there before then. So you can't pin this down. So I'm sure that this Lynn's, as well as my ancestors, were occasionally found in Germany and then moved on. Lipschutz apparently became Livshitz, which was Russianized as people wanted to belong and fit in into Livshin. I empathize with all of that. Cool, bring it on. So many different aspects.
I see that Casey has a question, and I'm going to preempt it a little bit with a question that is going to, I hope, address it. You may address her question a little bit by answering mine. I wanted to check in with you about something really lovely that Mona said in the beginning of your reading. In the chat room, she wrote, "It pleases me to see people dealing with life on Zoom, kids and pets." I think she meant when you're something distracted you momentarily. And I think that is so connected to the idea of combine just we live in our homes, we live in our roles. We may also be poets and writers. What are the important things for us to write about? That domesticity would be an important theme that would feed us, nurture us, be expressive about who we are and the meaning of life. I loved Mona's comment drawing attention to, of course we have distractions. And for you, I know that you are a multi-role person. You teach, you write, you support other poets. You are an activist, you're a mother, you're a wife. So I guess I was hoping to maybe get a few words from you, if you would, about, in particular, perhaps mothering or parenting and being a poet and an activist. And you started to allude to that a little bit, Olga, but
mothering. I caught mothering as a theme, and also domesticity, right? And it's sort of interesting how in our culture those two are sort of assumed to be one and the same, and they're not. Yeah. I think becoming a mother was really hard for me. And I kind of knew within a week or two that it was going to be that either I'm going to just learn to really love it, or I might do something really stupid, you know, really. And it was luckily that I really grew to love this person who's sitting there looking at me to my right. And I would say that it interrupts the creative process like nothing else, and then it restores us to our biggest priorities. Yeah, so as far as domesticity goes, I'm the kind of person who's only recently learned to like some aspects of it. I'm not going to say all of it. I just don't like it. But there are moments of kind of where one taps into creativity and in domesticity, and I think it's the kind of energy that we have as little girls and little boys playing house or playing mom and dad or what have you, where you're kind of creating this little calm oasis. And that definitely appeals to me. I was doing a lot of house cleaning, being nervous for this reading tonight. So, yay. Dishwashing is very calming sometimes.
Oh
Other
my goodness.
like it.
Housework is
No,
warm
I
up to
don't know. I
reading.
don't know. Like, I don't have any words of wisdom. It's not a very good situation for us in this culture. We don't have supportive, most of us don't have supportive mothers next door, aunts, you know, all of that one has to kind of create from scratch. I had wonderful babysitters who spoke my native language of Russian with Nathan. That was wonderful. I think I benefited from that probably more than as much as, or even more than sometimes, because it calms you down. But it's an uphill battle, and what I can say is that it's very gratifying that I lucked out with a child who's very creative and playful. And so you definitely, Nathan, you give me a lot of that kind of energy that I need for slowing down and kind of playing with life as opposed to being overly serious. And as a teacher, I do teach kids creative writing on Zoom. So what I do as a teacher really stems from that mode of playing while parenting. We do a lot of kind of, you alluded to intimacy, Kelly, and I think we do a lot of hanging out in our rooms. They show me their stuffies. I see their pets. I see their siblings and their very stressed mothers and fathers. And what that does for me is I can tap into hopefully some kind of authenticity that this child has and help them write about what really matters to them. I don't shy away from the word divorce. One kid's family is going through something really awful. And I said, you can write about whatever you want. So that includes divorce. And we did yesterday. So that was a really good day for teaching. Other times it breaks down. But I think Zoom is really a blessing in that regard, in that we can be in each other's rooms and see life as the way it is. More so, I think that's kind of the weird gift of the pandemic. Really glad you did the Zoom event. It was really wonderful to connect to so many people as a result. Thanks for that.
And so Casey, you know, asks this question that I think you are really addressing, which is, she says, I teach an online intro to creative writing course, and some students are here tonight. What advice do you have for beginner writers? And I mean, I think you just really gave a lot with write about anything.
Yeah.
And it's okay to write about, but what else, how else would you like to address that question?
Yeah. I think what has been interesting to me to note is with a lot of writers, especially with adults, but I think also the younger people, it's amazing to me how much guilt we carry, right? About this kind of the alternatives to the stoic and athletic model of writing every day, writing every single day, a certain number of words, sending out this number of works, this number of acceptances, well, maybe not acceptance, maybe rejections, but we need to send them out so that they can get rejected, right? All of these engage in terms and a very familiar language of productivity that we don't have to use. And so if you write about what truly interests you, you will bring in that energy um, of love, of pain, of frustration, of awkwardness, of humor to your work. And if you don't, your teacher might see that So just, you don't need to cheat, just write about what truly interests you. I was amazed at how my teacher, Janet Sylvester, always knew that when something was really uncomfortable for me, and I would gloss over it. And she was like, I don't understand. And I'm like, oh, you must be a mind reader. So yeah, write about what is truly dear to you and what interests you. And don't be afraid, again, of shying away. Don't shy away from writing about other people. You don't have to only write about yourself. It's much better. I think Werner Herzog was talking about it. He has an autobiography out that sounds really interesting. But he was talking on NPR about how navel gazing, as he put it, like that term, but navel gazing to him, he said, is not only not productive, but he said also dangerous. And that is why he makes his films about other people, clearly also about his own obsessions.
I want to give you a chance to maybe just talk a little bit as our last thing to talk about tonight, even though I could talk a lot longer. But the process of translation, you've done so much important work with translation, and I'm not sure that everybody always understands what a poet translator is actually doing, and how you are approaching a text in another language and then bringing it into the language of English for us. And I just wonder if you might talk about that, because this is there's the poem, the original poem as a work of art, and then there's the translation as a work of art, and how you get there. Just say a little bit so we can just make sure we give our honor and respect to that process.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it is a ton of work. And there are still entire publishing houses, not only here, but in Europe, that will not name the translator. Just suddenly, by some magic, this poem coalesced in French or English. So a friend, Jennifer Croft, has been advocating for #name the translator. So what does that work look like? You can translate a sentence in many different ways. And that is in part because a language is, in a different language, there can be a totally different word order. Or it could be because you make a choice that decides to prioritize something in English that is actually like maybe prioritized slightly differently in the original. So there's a lot of creativity and playfulness here. I think you said a poet translator. I think poetry translator is probably a little bit more accurate, because my husband is not a poet and he's always the really crazy, creative, radical translator in our duo. And he takes a lot more risks than me. I keep saying, but here in the Russian it says, but here we're going to lose the subtext. And he always corrects me and says, and it needs to be a great poem. Okay, what if we do this? You can always delete this. I don't know. So we have these silly fights. They're the best kind. Translation is
Yeah, it
just
sounds like a fascinating collaborative process. Yeah.
gives us something to fight other than dishes, more topics. Yeah. So there are a lot of us in this country who live in other languages mostly. They think and dream in other languages. And to those people, living just in English feels like, kind of monochromatic. It's not real. It's not fully dimensional, and there are important voices missing from their lives and things they can't share with others. So I'm one of those people, and it always feels kind of urgent and painful to me that this doesn't yet exist in English. And, this sort of kind of love and, therapy is what moves me. But lots of people do it for totally other reasons. But there is a lot of kind of self-sacrifice among translators to serve this author, serve this work. And I'm very lucky to mostly translate folks who are like super grateful and alive. Being alive kind of helps a little bit. And they're super, super nice. And during this war with Ludmilla, I'm talking to her about her work while they're basically secluded in the middle of Umbria, in the middle of the countryside, she and her husband, has been really gratifying. And she said, sometimes I wake up and I don't know, what am I alive for? But these conversations, just as much as the book, they help me see the bright side. And I do think that interaction is really valuable. So yay, learn a language, or if you speak one, go out there and translate a poem today. Well,
Or
today's late in
read
there.
poems in translation. Right.
Yes. Order books.
That
There
too.
are books for sale. Aerosmith Press. Wonderful
Yes.
publication. Really pretty. This wonderful artist in Odessa did this, and she had almost no electricity. And we approached her and said, "May we use this PDF? And how much would you charge?" And she said, "Yes, $100. I don't know what I'm looking at because I don't have enough of a phone charge, but go ahead." And I'm not going to be able to get back to you. So just do whatever you like, $100. This is her work. Another Olga in Odessa. Please support Ukrainian poets. By translation, read the books in translation.
Thank you so much. And Venmo, you have put your direct contact for buying your books. Also, it would be great if we could put your website, Jen, if you have Olga's, maybe
I
you've already
did.
put it there.
I believe I
That would be
called myself
But
a
we could learn
sheep.
more about your work and about your creative writing teaching with young people and all the other wonderful things that you do. Oh, Olga, this has really been huge. Thank you. Thank you so much
Thanks
for
so
all your
much.
energy, for
Wonderful
all the beautiful
questions.
read.
Thanks so much to this
And
community.
thank you to this wonderful audience for asking great questions tonight. We're going to move now. I'm actually going to make sure I remember. I'm going to turn off the recording. And